Greetings, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for another episode of the Memories of Plymouth. We're nearing completion of our 6th season with you, where we've been bringing in people and others from the surrounding communities to tell their stories of what life was like way back when. Many of these people were born here, educated here, worked here, socialized here. Some came to visit here and there and stayed. This morning I'm excited to share with you our guest.
Willis Merrill.
Oh, you're starting. I'm going to say, what is your name?
Willis Merrill.
All right. So I'm going to ask a lot of questions, Willie. Can I call you Willie?
Yes.
All right. So I'm going to ask you a lot of questions to allow the audience today to get to know you a little bit. Are you ready?
Yes.
Here we go. All right. So state your full name, if you would, please, for our audience.
Willis Richardson Merrill II.
And the first, who would he be?
My father.
All right. You can either share with the audience your age or when you were born. Some people don't like to state their age for whatever reason, but I have to extend a birthday greeting to you because you just turned
90.
So you were
I'm
born.
sure if I say my birth date, they would figure it out.
You know, they would do that. It would take a little figuring on some people's parts. Let's talk about Dad, if you don't mind, for a bit. In your eyes, what was Dad like? And maybe state his occupation.
Well, he was a rural carrier for 40 years in Campton, and we had a small farm in Campton Village, and he was in the First World War, and he worked, during the war, he worked at a local mill, Dole's Mill in Campton. After he got done his mail route, he worked spinning, and he also done guard duty down a Beaver River bobbin mill during the war.
And Mom's name?
Gertrude Marie Rokerson Merrill.
And what did Mom do? Was she a stay-at-home mom, or?
She stayed at home. When she was younger, her father and mother run a school of music in Boston, and they worked with a Boston Symphony Orchestra. My mother was a concert celloist.
You shared with me that she traveled really quite far in order to perform.
She worked with a Chautauqua group that traveled through New England, and she spent the winters in Boca Grande Island in Florida, and in the spring she traveled up through Pennsylvania and played. They had a violinist, a pianist, and a vocalist, and they traveled to inns and churches and gave little concerts, and spent some time in Sugar Hill, New Hampshire, and out in the Catskills, New York, and up in Bar Harbor, Maine.
Wow. Wow. Anyone in your family today have that same gift of music?
No, I'm afraid not. My sister and I took piano lessons, and we used to play at the Grange in Rumney, Grange in South Plymouth, Campton Grange, the Thornton Grange. We played duets.
You have a brother, sister?
I have a brother who passed away years ago. He was a mechanic. He worked 2 or 3 gas stations in town. He opened them up when he got out of the service. He went in the Second World War in March, and he was in Hickam Field, Hawaii, when the Japanese bombed it.
Wow. Wow. How young would he have been? Do you remember?
Probably 19.
Wow.
19 to 20.
We have a wife.
My wife. I thought you was going to ask about his wife, but my wife was Jean Evelyn DeMag Merrill. She went to school here in Plymouth College. She became a teacher, business teacher, assistant principal. She taught Monadnock Regional School. She taught in Hillsborough, where we have lived for 50 years, and she ended up teaching in Ware, New Hampshire. She got almost all her doctor requirements for a doctor's degree.
That's great. She's no longer with us.
No, she passed away in 2004. Had cancer.
You had a little story about Jean's early college years. Would you like to share that?
Well, her college years. Well, I met her down in the drugstore where I used to have lunch because I worked in town. And so after a few meetings, I took her and 3 other girls to drive in down to Weirs Beach. And we got dating. And one time I had the motorcycle and I'd drive around the college, and we would go the girls' dormitory, go up the fire escape in through and visit her there. But the house, after a couple times, the house mother caught me, and she took me down and out the front door. Told me I had to come in that way from now on. So I've been through college quite a few times here.
And through the front door, too. You have children?
Yes, I have 3. 2 boys and a girl. They're 65, 66, 69.
Okay. And we should name them.
Susan, David, and Willis III.
Okay, thank you, thank you. There's something special about your family. The Merrill Family Museum that's in Maine.
There's a Merrill family. The Merrills came from northwest France during the resurrection over there and moved to England. And then they came into Newburyport, Mass in around 1640, 35, 40, and settled in Newburyport. They were the first settlers in Newburyport. And one brother didn't have any children, one had 8. And when they got older, one child moved to Maine, and that's where all the Merrills of Maine came from. And up in Lee, Maine, they took over a dormitory where the kids came off from the farms to go to school. And they, on the condition that they restored it back to original. So the family rents out, they pay rent on each room. Each family has a room that they pay rent every year, so they can put all the artifacts and all the history articles of the whole family. It's a very interesting place.
There is a connection from your family to Wyatt Earp.
Yes, one of the ladies that went to a reunion up there came from Oklahoma, and she married an Earp, and she has held the gun, one of the guns that he had. Wow. And she had quite a history.
Yeah, I just think Wyatt Earp, wow, what a connection you have. Let's talk about your education. You attended elementary school around here.
I had a school in Campton Village. It was a 2-room schoolhouse, 4 grades on one side and 4 on the other.
My question is, when I was reading it this morning, it's 1 to 4 and 5 to 8. I think I'm correct, but
yes.
All right. Same teacher teaching both sections, or were there multiple teachers there?
There was one teacher for the first 4 grades and one teacher for the upper grades.
That's interesting. Can you share some of the names of the teachers you had? Because that might resonate with some of the folks in this audience.
Oh, I remember my first 4 grade teacher. She was Mrs. Cotton. She rented a room up in the town, and each one of us kids were chosen to go get our lunch. We'd walk up and pick our lunch where she was staying and bring it down. And then in the upper 4 grades, we had Mrs. Dole, Lavinia Dole, and she was an aunt. the Dole family was, and she was a pretty good teacher. She was very disciplined. She liked to use a rubber hose if they misbehaved.
Excuse me, rubber hose?
Oh yes.
Can you? I think I know what's happening, but I'm not sure.
Well, if you were disruptive in school,
What did you do with
the
the
rubber
hose?
hose would meet your legs and your butt.
All right, I've got it.
And then she'd call home, and you'd get the same thing when you go home.
Oh my gosh, we're moving on. We're moving on that one.
Double jeopardy.
You and I had this one same teacher, Miss Spitzner.
Miss Spitzer, my sister had Miss Spitzer
All right.
in the 5th, 6th, and 8th grade. Because she was 2 years ahead of me. And Miss Spitzer was a very disciplined person. But you better learn when she's telling you what to do. But it's difficult. If you got 4 grades, you got the 5th grade over on this side of the room, and they're all split up. So you kind of listen to the 8th graders. A lot of times you pick up all the history and what's going on.
For me, it's just amazing that teachers can do this, that you have multi-ages in the same area and you're hearing different things, and the teacher has to switch grades maybe every once in a while.
Yeah, I would think it was very
Wow.
good. We had, the town of Camden had up to, at one time 15 schools,
15.
15 little schoolhouses.
And these would be one room?
One room schoolhouses, and they had all 8 grades.
So they would be built close where the population was growing.
Yes.
All right, interesting.
And a lot of times there was only 8, 10, 12 kids.
And then eventually they started to consolidate a little bit.
Then they consolidated. They were still some of the small schools running in the late 40s.
Didn't know that recent. Interesting. You talked about Mrs. Dole and what she asked you people to do as part of the war effort.
During the war effort, we collected scrap metal and piled it on the front lawn, and we picked milkweeds. There's not too many milkweeds growing wild nowadays, but the milkweeds were used to make life preservers. So we had onion bags, and we'd go out weekends and fill them up. And we got the money we got from scrap. She got a radio and a phonograph.
Wow. Wow.
For the school.
Are we talking milkweeds or milk pods? For me, in my head,
the pods.
The pods.
Yeah.
Those I try to have in the back of my gardens because they attract the butterflies, and we want the butterflies to come.
Right.
Yeah, most people will rip them up, and they're telling us, please don't, keep them there. Yeah, all right. Since we're talking about, let's see, as a young boy, did you have a job?
Well, I had to weed the garden, milk the cow, and we had a horse, we had pig, chickens, ducks, most of the animals, and it was a job to get up in the morning and help my father when I was small, and even when I was in high school, I had to get up and milk a cow.
Before school?
Before school. And for grammar school, it was a mile we had to walk. They didn't have buses back then. We walked a mile. And then when we went to high school, a gentleman in Plymouth had a bus, and he charged us $1.50 a week to ride the bus.
I think a lot of people will know this gentleman's name. Guy Allen?
Guy Allen. Yep.
Yep.
He was a pretty good bus driver. He wasn't too hard on us. If we fooled around, he'd stop the bus and kick us off, and we have to walk home.
All right.
Today they can't do that.
No, you'd get into trouble. The parents would come forward probably. But again, there weren't many vehicles had by the high school students, and so what I've been told in the past in interviews, they couldn't stay after school for extracurriculars too often. Did you have any opportunity to do something like that?
No, well, in high school, after school, sometimes you stayed, but during school, the 8th period was all activity period.
That was new for me.
We had an old car, we took up an auto mechanics and took it all apart and restored it. And we could go bowling down at the old railroad station where the senior center is now.
And this is by class now. It was open to anyone that wanted to go during that last period of the day.
Yeah.
Bowling down there.
Some classes were offered other than activity class. I can't remember which ones there were, but they had dancing class and things like that.
And who's the principal?
Although I did flunk dancing.
You
I
flunked
dancing.
dancing.
Nobody flunks dancing, but I used to dance with Mrs. Kane. She was a teacher, and she didn't like it, so she flunked me.
Okay. I'm not sure that we're going to edit this out. She might be still around. I'm kidding. Your principal at that time, who was he?
Mr. Keach.
Mm-hmm.
He was a pretty good person. You behaved. He'd take you in the office and tell you what went on. And I had to behave because he liked to deer hunt, and he would come up to the farm and go deer hunting with my father.
Ah.
So he would tell my father and mother what I'm doing in high school.
And you had to behave.
Reasonably so, yes.
Okay. You're clarifying that. Let's talk about your memories as far as businesses that you've had over time.
Well, I worked 4 different gas stations in Plymouth. My brother run, when he got out of the service in 45, he opened up the Jenny station, which is down where the Lucky Dog is. There used to be a Jenny station there. And he ran that for a few years, and I worked there after school, weekends. And then he decided to sell out, and he went to California for a few years and came back, and he opened up a mobile station that was down in South Plymouth next to the old laundry building. And I worked there, and then Earl Dibben worked for Rand's. He wanted to open up the Esso station, which is the north end. I think it was right where the Meredith Bank is. I think Edgar's Diner was right next to it.
Right? Edgar's.
So he wanted to open that up, and he didn't know how to run one. So they asked me to help him run the business for a while, and I ordered the gas, the oil, and the grease guns, and everything else.
How old were you during this time?
I was probably 17 about that time.
Okay.
Yeah, and of course, when working with my brother, a lot of people knew me, and they liked what I did and everything. So he started losing some of his customers up to Mr. Dibben's. So he told Mr. Dibben I couldn't work for him anymore. So I went back down and worked with my brother.
Mm-hmm.
Then there was a mobile station right next to the D&M building, and I worked there for 2 weeks. Somebody in his family died up in Quebec, and I run that station for 2 weeks, and I was probably 17 or 18 at the time. So that's the only place I worked
In Plymouth.
in Plymouth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Let's move on other places that you've worked over time. Outside of Plymouth, when you were down to Hillsborough Dairying?
Down in Hillsborough, well, when I got out, I had been during the Korean War in the service, and so when I got out looking for a job, I went to work for Moody Dole. He ran a woolen mill in Pembroke, and so I worked there. But in the meantime, my wife and we didn't have much, so I found a job during the day, and I worked second shift for Moody for 5 years. And I worked for Grand Union grocery store in North Concord. I worked in a used furniture store on Main Street, Concord, and then I'd walk down past Bank Chevrolet. There was a little diner there. I'd walk down, have my lunch, and stand outside the road, and people from Hillsborough that worked in Suncook pick me up and take me to work, and then take me home at night. So I done that for 5 years. And then during that time, I worked as a part-time in the post office. And I became a rural carrier in the post office in 1970. I worked 30 years.
You also worked, did your wife also work at Sylvania there?
My wife and I we both worked at Sylvania. She worked longer than I did, and I worked as a machinist in the 60s.
Trying to think, you talked about being a rural carrier. You had a special position as time. You called it a quality work-life program?
Yes.
Can you talk about that a bit?
Because of some postmasters and some rural carriers and the Postal Service, the city carriers had their program too later on. They decided to get together and have a quality work life, where make a team in each post office or surrounding post office and sit with the postmasters and discuss problems. Concerns, better than problems. It sounds better. And we would use a flip chart, and the postmaster would write down what he had concerns of what the rural carriers do, and the rural carriers would do the same thing. Then you discuss it and come to a common understanding. And so they needed, the union needed somebody to do that and start it up. So they chose me. And so I went to California to school out there to learn how to mediate discussions. And so I done that as a facilitator for the state of New Hampshire. And then they needed regional trainers to train other facilitators in other states. So I got to be a regional trainer, and I done that for 6 years. I come home on Friday night or Saturday, fly in and fly out Sunday night, and go all over Kentucky, Illinois, all the places. I done that for 6 years, and then I came back to work and said I retired.
I was going to say, you finally retired after how many years? You've held many positions over that time. And what did you do after retirement?
Well, after retirement, I didn't really retire. I didn't like sitting home and doing chores around my house. So I went to work with my son-in-law, building houses as a carpenter. And while I was doing that, in the meantime, I had a friend that sold ambulances in New England out of Natick, Mass. And he looking for somebody to drive ambulances from the factory out in Missouri and Columbus, Ohio. So I says, oh yeah, I need something to do, so I'll do that in between building houses. So I done that 10 years. I'd fly out and drive back. And so that was one of my jobs. And one winter,
you must have seen a great deal of the country when you're driving home.
Oh, it's beautiful, all over. And one winter we finished the house in 1st of January, and I didn't want to sit around the rest of the winter. So I called a trucking company in Indiana and told them I wanted to drive truck. And they thought I was a little off to come from New Hampshire to go out there and drive truck. And my wife thought the same thing. But anyway, I drove out there and talked to them, and they tossed me the keys, and I drove. It was a 1-ton truck. I hauling boats, John boats into New Jersey, power boats and stuff along the ocean front, and cattle trailers, horse trailers, camping trailers, and 1st of February, they owned these trucks, but there was private guys doing it too, but they couldn't get anybody to haul a trailer to Anchorage, Alaska. So February, I said, hey, I'll take it. They said, really? I said, yeah, I got to have a haul home to get my winter clothes, my snowsuit. So I went to Anchorage, Alaska. It was 46 below in the Whitehorse area of the Yukon. And of course my wife thought I was nuts too.
46 below?
She didn't want to go with me. I wish she had, but anyway. So that was, I quit 1st of May. I hauled trailers and things into Canada. And I told them on 1st of May I was going home. So
I wonder how many miles you accumulated during all those years that you were transporting vehicles, boats.
well, I was going every day for all that time, a little over 50,000 miles.
Wow, wow.
Because I didn't keep a very good logbook, so I kept driving. And I saw a lot of country.
You were fortunate. You and your wife went to Alaska after that time?
No, we went in 77, 79, 81. The year they opened up the pipeline, we went. And we went for 2 months at a time. She was a teacher and she had summer off, and I was able to get time off. And so we enjoyed it. She loved the country, loved that. She taught her to safety, 25 years. She tied her own fishing flies, and she was a better shot than me.
Wow.
So she liked the wilderness, she liked traveling, and we had a wonderful time.
One time you're traveling in Alaska and you mentioned that you had to stop on the side of the road. You saw these people protesting.
Oh, yeah. The year they opened the pipeline crossed that Alaskan highway and goes down into Valdez. And this big motorhome was packed side of the road with big strings of lights out, the generator running, and they were sitting out there having a good time with a sign up protesting the pipeline.
They did not want it to occur.
They didn't want it to occur, so we were driving by and I put the brakes on and my wife says, what? So I can't let it go. So I backed up and I got out. She says, oh no. I went out and I asked them where they were from. They're from California, and why they were protesting the pipeline. Well, they're hurting the environment, and we didn't need the gas. I says, well, you know, you're kind of hypocrites, aren't you? You're burning gasoline with a generator up here, come all the way with a big motorhome from California, and you're protesting the pipeline. Well, he wasn't very happy with me, so I just went in my pickup and went.
And your wife was happy?
My wife had the doors locked because he thought he was going to bang me.
Wow, wow.
Yeah, I can't find somebody like that. I couldn't let it go.
Yeah. Getting to know you, couldn't let it go. Couldn't let it go. Over the years, especially when you were down in Hillsborough, you served the community in several different capacities.
Yes.
Volunteering.
I lived in Hillsborough a little bit, then I moved to Deering and built a new home. And I joined the planning board of Deering in the early 60s when it first started.
Wow.
And I served on the planning board of Deering for over 25 years. I served as selectman for 4 years in the town of Deering. I served on the school building committee, 2 different school building committees. And I belonged to the Legion, I belonged to the Lions Club, I belonged to the Moose Club. And so I was pretty busy.
It sounds like it.
And when I retired, I gave it all up.
So was it after retirement you came back home here to Campton?
No, we stayed in Deering, and we had been vacationing out west, and we wanted to build a log home on some land my father gave me in Campton. So my wife and I planned what we wanted reasonably, and I just got done in 2004. 2003, she got cancer. But I was working on a school building committee for a new middle school, and she was able to be be at the opening. Excuse me. She was able to be at the opening of the school.
That's great.
And passed away in 2004, and then I stayed home for 2 years and decided to come up and build my log home.
Mm. On your father's land?
On land he gave me, up on a mountain.
And that kept you busy for a while?
Oh yes, I laid every log, I done all the wiring, everything on it. So yes, I kept, it still isn't complete, some of it.
We could put a sign up here, handyman. Anybody want a handyman? Because that's what you've been saying. I can do this,
Yeah.
I can do that.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a very, very good time. I'm glad my wife and I traveled when we could.
I think a lot of people wait a very long time, wait till retirement, and then will go traveling, and oftentimes that cannot pan out for them. So I think your message to the audience is do it while you can.
Yes, some of the people on my mail route in the 80s would want to know where we went on our vacation, and they would say, well, my husband and I are going to retire next year or something, and we want to travel. We always wanted to travel, saved our money. And I said, you should go when you can. And one couple, within 2 years, they only went once, and he had passed away. And they were very good friends, and they were pretty bad, pretty hurt.
So your advice is do it now. Do it when you can.
Do what you can.
No, that's good advice.
Everybody doesn't have that opportunity, but
If you do.
if you want to go up in the mountains, take a Sunday trip, see what's out there, because you're very fortunate you don't live in the city.
We're very fortunate we live here. You're right. We can, within an hour, we're in the White Mountains, and there's so much to do, and it seems to change. There's something we've done every year, I think, for almost 40, more than that now, 50 years. We've done the same thing every year when we go to the White Mountains. It becomes very special to a lot of us.
The White Mountain,
Yeah.
the northern New Hampshire, and, Vermont. Vermont's beautiful.
Yeah.
Route 100 in Vermont is primitive all the way down. It's beautiful.
Oh, that's nice. That's nice. We're going to switch a little bit. I'm going to ask you questions, and you're going to try to respond. Are you ready?
Go for it.
You got it. You got it. Thinking about you as a child here, a teenager perhaps, any reflections on living in the area? Campton, Thornton,
Well,
Plymouth?
yeah, we working on a farm. Well, I reflect on working for one relative, hoeing his beans and corn for 50 cents a day. I worked 3 days, but they always had a pot of beans on the wood stove. So I got all the beans I wanted to eat, and then I had all potatoes and everything else. I pedaled my bike in Thornton. I think it was probably 6 miles to this place. And
Wow.
I done that, and then I helped hay. My neighbor helped hay, and we hayed.
That's neat. It was difficult to travel because there weren't. Did your parents have a car? I was going to say very few people had a car, especially we as teenagers.
Oh yes, my father was a rural mail carrier. He had a car. When he got out of the First World War, he done the mail route with horse and buggy. Then he had one of the first Model Ts, a snowmobile. They made it, tracks on them, made a snowmobile in the wintertime.
I'm going to ask a question. I really don't know this. We really enjoy our mail carrier, as you call him, and we chat a little bit. And I've always thought about they're in their own car. Is that correct?
Yes.
They use their own car.
I used my own car too when I was a road car.
And do you get paid for using your car?
Back then, he didn't get paid for using his own car, and I know in the late 30s he used to take home $97 a month to get paid by the month, and he had to furnish his car. Of course, gasoline was 5 gallons for $1, I think, back then. But still, we didn't have any extra money. My mother canned everything we ate in the wintertime. We had butchered a cow or a pig or something. But yes, my mother never drove, So we had one car in the family.
That was pretty normal then, one car.
Yeah.
You had to make do. You had to make do. But if I'm a mail carrier today, do I get some kind of compensation or benefit for using
they
my
get-
car?
If they use their own car today, they get so much a mile.
Interesting.
But
Interesting.
most places, the postal service is buying vehicles. You'll see a little white van running around. They giving them to the rural carrier, so I'm not sure that's efficient enough.
Yeah.
But-
We were talking about the war a little bit, war effort, and you had said to me a victory garden. I'm comfortable with that term, but can you share that with our audience? What was a victory garden?
During the war, I was in with a 4-H club, and everybody didn't have enough food, so we had a victory garden. It was sponsored by the 4-H Clubs of America, I guess, and it had a little sign, Victory Garden, and we put it on our garden, and most people had a garden. But my father being a rural carrier back then, you could do a lot of things. If somebody needed a pound of butter, you might take a pound of butter and trade it for something else.
Barter. Get back and
Yeah.
forth. Interesting.
Yeah.
Did you have ration books at that time during the war?
Yes.
Can you remember that as a
They had
kid?
ration books, with 5 ration books. In fact, I still got them at home. A lot of old stuff like that.
I'm going through your attic.
You got,
Can't help it.
you might find a lot. But yeah, we had little coupons you tear out for so much for butter, meat. Yeah.
What was difficult to get during the wartime? Can you remember that? We can pass, but
Well, most people had a hard time getting meat. The meat they would get in Plymouth here, or some farmer, but they used to check the farmers to see where the animals are going. But Keniston's had a little meat market in South Plymouth, and you could go in there with your ration book and tear off your little meat sticker. And
so the stickers actually said the item, if it was for sugar or meat or flour.
I think it.
Did
I
it?
think it did.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But they come around our farm and they count the chickens, and my father got a little upset, so we built a chicken house up in the woods. We had over 300 acres of land. Built a chicken house out in the woods and kept some of the chicken out there. That way we could barter with a neighbor.
It was in the 30s. Someone had shared a story with me. When they were in the 30s, I believe the government said you could no longer own gold. I'm going a little off task right now. Some of the people said, and you had to return it. You had to give it. All right. And some of the people actually I'm not telling you anything, and we're not on TV, but they took their gold pieces and they put it in the ground for decades. Have you ever heard a story like that?
Yeah, I believe they did.
Interesting.
And they drew a little map.
Where it was supposed to be later on?
A lot of the old stories out west, they would fence their land, and if the farmer sits in the kitchen table eating in the breakfast, he could look out and see a post in the ground, and he buried it underneath it with a jar. And so they found a lot of stuff like that out in the west.
I'm going to get one of those machines that takes me out to find what's under my rocks.
You could find a lot of things under the rock.
I don't think so where I live. Let's talk about childhood memories. Can you share a story or two about weather? During your time here, what kind of abnormal, maybe it was normal, what kind of weather conditions could have posed a problem or brought you great joy? Floods, ice jams, bounty of snow? Bounty of snow.
Well, I remember my father and I walking up back on the hill behind the house during the 38 floods, hurricane. And we could look down the Beaver River and see that all the flatlands were flooded. And the land next to our farm blew down all the trees on the south side of the mountain.
Wow.
And it was pretty tough. And then I remember some snowstorms that one winter it took 2 days for the town tractor to get past our farm in Campton, the wind would blow out of the north. We used to have a lot of snow. There's 3-4 feet of snow is nothing. And everybody didn't get plowed out like today. We have people come to town and they think the minute it starts snowing, it's time to plow the road. But you're in the country. You have to adapt to what goes on in the country.
You may not get to work
That's true.
for a day or two.
Yep.
Did school close down? Can you remember that? If there was a large amount of snow, would they close down your school system?
Well, they didn't have a system like they do today. They call around and tell everybody the school's closed. You just put your boots on and walked up on top of the cross and go to school.
That was it. That was it.
Yeah.
Let's see what we have. Yeah, you did say going to school for you was about a mile away that you had to walk. Okay. How about fires? Do you have memories of fires at all? Businesses, industries, homes perhaps that you can recall?
Well, I can recall one home in Eastern Corner of Campton that burned, and when you hear the church bell ring, that was somebody called up, and that was a fire alarm. And Mr. Bean was a fire chief back in the 40s, and he had a trailer with a pump on it and the hoses and everything else. They didn't have a fire truck. I guess it was the early mid-40s they got a fire truck. But we would whoever was close by pedal to his garage and pull the trailer out and hook it on his car when he arrived, and off we go. And we pedal our bikes, follow the fire truck out, and do what we could. Then you could go up to the house and people would pass out chairs and clothing and stuff. The kids just would help take it away. Today it's so toxic, and some of the firemen don't want anybody around, and it's pretty strict. We had a fire in Hillsborough quite a few years ago, and the man had a couple old cars and real nice cars in it, and he came home and the house was on fire, barn wasn't, and they wouldn't let him in. He fought in and they arrested him. He wanted to get his cars out.
Wow. Plymouth Fair.
Plymouth Fair, very entertaining place, the largest fair in New Hampshire. It had everything you could think of. We used to take beans and tomatoes and stuff down exhibit in the 4-H room and watch the horses and all the parades, all the animals. It was really nice fairs.
What was the favorite one? Can you do that?
The favorite?
Yeah. When you went to the fair, was the favorite time, a favorite event, a favorite attraction?
Well, the parade was a lot, and the rides. The rides aren't like they are today. Swings and whips.
Oh, all right.
Twirl around.
Sure.
Merry-go-rounds. Not much else, but because we were always watching the horses.
You said to me, I usually ask the question, where did you enjoy, if at all, eating on the main street or at your house? But you didn't get to the main street too often here in Plymouth because you live so far away and you lack the transportation.
Well, the folks never took us out weekends to eat.
Yeah.
They didn't have all these fast foods. We would go once a year to Laconia before school and buy shoes and some clothes, and we would eat out then. And we might go to Concord Christmas time. My mother would take the train and go down and see her mother was alive until the mid-70s. And she would go down there and do Christmas shopping.
I asked you about major changes during your decades here in the area, large area, extended area. What changes have you seen take place?
Well, all the one-room schoolhouses are gone. Big schools made. Different sports now. We never had soccer. Never heard of soccer.
I won't tell that to the coach.
You won't tell that to the coach, or maybe you better not. He'll probably see this thing. And when in high school and later on, we went to Edgar's Diner.
Right.
Was popular place. So down Minneculla, Felsty, Minneculla, next to the movie theater. He had a diner there with pretty good food.
Was there a favorite dish that Mom might have made when you were young?
Well, we had mostly meat and potatoes and vegetables because we had everything. We always had a big breakfast before we went to school, but we'd have sandwiches at school, take time as a school, because now you can't take peanut butter. We lived on peanut butter most of the time.
So many children are allergic to it?
Yeah, we had peanut butter, all kinds of sandwiches.
Have you seen any of our celebrations, the Campton celebrations, 200, 250th? Any recollections of those?
Yes, 76 celebration. I brought my Model T, 23 Model T Ford coupe up and put that in the parade. Got first prize.
Ooh.
Of course, Johnny Doe was a judge and he's a relative. I wonder if that had anything to do with it.
Perhaps.
We had a good time then.
Is there a person in your family and beyond your family that was very important to you during your lifetime, maybe a mentor?
Well, my father had the most impression on me, and my mother was pretty good impression on me. Strict impression. If you didn't practice your piano, she make sure you did. But
you go, Mom.
Yeah, father was pretty good. He had to cut wood after work. We had to burn wood in a farmhouse, and we got along good. I helped him. It was no chainsaws then, hand saw.
We forget that, don't we?
Cut and split. We'd take a horse and they would haul the logs out. We'd cut them up. But my brother, when he got out of the service, he was pretty good. He took me under his wing, and
That's nice.
I worked with him quite a bit.
So who would be your best friend? Did you have one that you'd like to share? We can pass.
Oh, yeah. I had Eddie DeGrace. He was a couple of years older than I was. We used to ride motorcycles together. And I have a story about one of my teachers. Ethel Pratt was my English teacher. And she lived in a rental apartment along with the biology teacher. And my wife rented there too after the first year's college here. And so when I was going with my wife, she says, "You suppose you got anybody that you know that would go out with Ethel?" And I said, "Well, I'll ask Eddie DeGrace." We were a little wild then, but anyway, so I asked him. He said, "Well, yeah, okay." So we went out. So he didn't know who it was, and my wife didn't tell me who it was. She just says Ethel, and I didn't even attach it to my English teacher. So we went down to pick him up, and he comes out, and so Ethel was a good friend of my wife. They used to sew together and everything else. We got to be good friends. But that's how. And Eddie and I worked together different places, and then his younger brother Ray and I bummed around for a while, and so those about the. We didn't have all automobiles to go everywhere, but during that time.
You had shared that some of your members of your family had been in the war, and there was a Gilman Lovejoy. joined the service
he
in
was
1840.
somewhere around 1840. I got his papers that when he joined as a first lieutenant, and I believe it was he was in during the Mexican War, and I have his watch, the old English key wine watch that he carried. He got it from a sailor. It was Billy Gray was a sailor in Boston, and so I have that. And Gilman Lovejoy married a Merrill, so I know he was in the service during the Mexican War. I had I believe that we've had a Merrill since the Revolutionary War.
Wow.
And I got document of a Merrill who was in the Civil War who got shot at Cold Harbor or somewhere. He got shot in the chest, and he had his Bible in his shirt, and a bullet went into the Bible and it broke his bones, and it didn't get to his heart. But they were shipped to Concord Hospital, and it's written in the history that he was shipped to Concord for recuperation. And then my father was in the First World War, and my brother was in the Air Force in the Second World War. My sister and I joined during the Korean War, and that's where our family ended in the service.
Oh, thank you for your service. I've written down civil defense wardens. I've heard a little bit about this. Could you share?
During the Second World War, there was a blackout. You had to paint your headlights so they didn't shine. You have to keep your shades, dark shades in the house. And they were worried about getting attacked by Germany. So they had civil defense wardens. They had a warden outpost on Campton Pond, and the men would go up there and spend 2 or 4 hours every night, and with glasses and seeing who the airplanes were flying over. There wasn't that many anyway, and they needed to coordinate with a civil defense building over on Ellsworth Hill, and so they needed messengers. So the kids on the bicycles, we'd race over there and back to see who was the fastest. Eddie DeGrace and I won, and so we got to be the messengers. And and my father was a warden, and so that's what went on during the war. They had a telephone direct line to the state headquarters.
So I'm assuming outside of Campton Pond there were many places like this in the area.
Yes.
Okay. We have some artifacts we want to share with our audience today. Can you reach that? Sure.
I got my father's First World War hat, and I got his gas mask that he carried in France. He was at headquarters Blackjack prison, and incidentally, Persian had his horse with him in France.
Wow. You know what? This is so unique. I've never seen a gas mask in my lifetime to be able to touch it, but the outside covering, Willie, has a story in and of itself.
Well, the covering has every town that my father went in France. It's all listed. It's fading now. We're going to get together and try to write down where it all went.
Do you think it's done in order?
Le Havre, probably Glasgow, Le Havre, Ages,
And is this Dad's
Le Mans,
Dad's
Paris,
handwriting?
Paris, Rhineland. Some of them you can't identify,
We'll work at it.
but it's got them all in, and the gas mask is.
We're working this. Wow.
It's rubber, and it's all kept together. It'll fall apart if I pull it apart.
No.
But anyway, this goes on the front, and it's got the canister inside. It's primitive, not what they got today, and it's got a little book, pull out how to put it on. That's still here.
Wow. So the instructions are there as well.
Yeah.
This is in really good condition here, but I love the towns that Dad went through when he was there. Do you think this is Dad's handwriting?
Pardon?
Do you think it's Dad's handwriting?
Yes.
Yeah, that's neat. That's neat.
He went in the First World War with Tom Dole and Emery Tobine. Emery Tobine lived in Taunton. They all went in together. I got a picture when they first joined.
That's neat.
And Emery Tobine got a little gas in him, and some of the other people were gassed. It hurt. Their bad health afterwards.
Wow, wow.
And I got his jacket
Yeah.
over here.
I wonder if I should, okay. You've
Oop,
got
I
your,
can't go.
yeah, I will go. So you start talking and I'm gonna go.
Yeah, I got his jacket that he wore. He was in the field artillery.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the 64 field artillery.
It's in
And
beautiful condition.
I got his cloth leggings they had, and I got some other things of his, dog tags. But
I'm still gonna go to your attic.
yeah, he was in the 64th Artillery. I was in the 66th Armored Division when I was in the service. So my family has been pretty active in the services.
We're almost out of time. And the last question, if you don't mind, I typically ask is, if you had a group of young folks here, based upon your decades on this earth, the experiences you've encountered, what advice might you share with them?
Well, I would tell them, if they're at all interested in history, ask your parents about their life. Ask them what the relatives did, how they worked, how things they did. There's a lot of history in every adult, good or bad. And just talk to your parents. Mm-hmm. It's a great life.
Mm-hmm. It is a great life. It is a great life. Willie, thank you. Appreciate the time that we've spent together over the last month or so, coming in today, sharing your stories. To the audience, please think about it. We have started this Memories program. We're ending our 6th year now. We want to capture these stories when we can. We're listening to people in our communities that have experienced so much, be it traveling, learning from their mothers and fathers, the work that they did. But we want to learn about the past. The more we learn about the past, the better we'll be able to maneuver into our future. I think that's important today.
Been
Yeah.
very interested in working with you.
Interesting is a really good word. Really, thank you. I
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, people. We'll join you next time for another episode of the Memories of Plymouth.